Melissa didn't know why on earth she was doing this now. It had seemed like a good idea at the time. When she'd read about the forgotten village in the local paper, it had sounded romantic. A village lost in time, dramatically stolen from its people in 1943 and given to the troops to prepare for the D-Day landings. And now it was being handed back, in part, all these years later. This vast expanse of derelict land, pub, houses, church, school, shops, and a plethora of other buildings should have been returned as soon as the war had finished. So the Purbeck Times had said that morning. But it never was. The villagers had been all but conned, and now Melissa was sitting in a painfully slow mass of traffic on her way to the grand reopening of the village of Tyneham, along with at least 200 other vehicles, all of which were crawling along. She hadn't been the only one eager to see the latest tourist attraction to open on the Dorset coast. Melissa adjusted the fan in the car, which she despairingly realised was already at maximum chill factor. It was having no effect on what had to be the hottest day of the year so far. Perhaps it was simply the sitting still, or perhaps it was sitting still in the unbearable July heat. As she felt her sunglasses slide down her nose, she cast them off and threw them onto the empty passenger seat. They bounced off the fabric and clattered onto the side of the door's interior. Melissa reached over to grab them again and shoved them back on her face. The heat was making her grouchy. "Why is this taking so long?" she asked, thumping the steering wheel with the palm of her hand. It wasn't really the heat, or even the traffic, that had annoyed her. It was more the fact that her boyfriend, Liam, had promised her a romantic fortnight away in Dorset, but he had in fact spent every waking moment so far knee-deep in surf and riptide, or whatever else he did, while paddling in and out of the coast on his board. Where was her romantic holiday? Melissa had tried to understand, agreeing that it was wonderful the weather was so excellent for surfing. Of course he should go and enjoy himself. After all, he'd paid so much money for this weekend pad in Kimmeridge, which he'd bought as an escape from his boring but overpaid job in banking. He deserved to let loose. But she hadn't expected to be alone every day. She'd tried surfing with Liam when they'd first got together 8 months ago, but he had no patience with her, especially when it became apparent she was never going to be able to even stand up on the board, let alone master catching a wave. He'd put up no fight when she suggested she'd leave him to it. But Melissa was a bit surprised that every day since they'd arrived Liam had gone surfing. When she'd asked this morning if they should do something together, something touristy, he'd simply said, "Maybe another day." Alone and bored, on the umpteenth walk around the chocolate box village of Kimmeridge, she'd popped into the newsagent, hoping to pick up a couple of glossy magazines to read while Liam was out. The woman behind the counter had been reading the story on the front page of the local paper. "Not before time," she'd said as Melissa approached the counter. "Utter disgrace, keeping it out of bounds this long. They're still not allowed back there to live." "Who aren't?" Melissa had inquired, simply out of politeness. "The residents of Tyneham, of course. Ex-residents, I should say." The woman tapped the front cover. "The village is reopening today." She shook her head. "After all this time, that'll be a sight to be seen." The bell above the door had sounded as another customer entered and queued politely behind Melissa. And so, without really thinking, Melissa reached over to the newspaper rack and took a copy out for herself, glancing quickly at the headline, "Forgotten Village Returned." She paid for her magazines and the paper and stepped out into the sunshine to read the lead story. She was no longer interested in the celebrity gossip and overpriced fashion. Instead, it was the potted history of a long-abandoned village that kept Melissa's eye on the page. Perhaps it wasn't her usual kind of holiday activity, but it was something to do. Armed with the paper and the crumpled map she kept in the glove compartment, Melissa had ventured into the countryside, expecting a quiet day wandering around the so-called forgotten village, perhaps with a handful of pensioners doing the same. But by the time she finally parked, guided into a makeshift parking bay, Melissa fancied she might